Welcome, everybody. My name is Pete Durand, and welcome to the Digitally Connected Retailer webinar with yours truly and our guest, Mauricio Orantes from Microsoft. So we'll let Mauricio introduce himself here real quick and talk about what he does for Microsoft, and then we'll also share a little bit about each one of the companies before we jump in. So Mauricio, I'll hand it over to you. What's your role at Microsoft?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. Longtime listener, first time participant, right? Yeah, so my name is Mauricio Orantes, and I'm Director of Partner Development. I'm based out of New York City. I've been living there for about 10 years. So I just play one on TV, right? I started finally earned my stripes. At Microsoft, I've worked with everyone top to bottom, from generalist partners to automotive partners, tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. So I know the space, and I'm really excited to be here to share some insights with our favorite partner, NetCertif.
Oh, that's what we want to hear. So real briefly, let's talk about NetCertif. We're not going to bore you with any sales pitches. This is pretty much a live Q&A, but we're full service digital marketing. We are not a creative agency. We're not a PR agency. In fact, we're not creative people at all. We're just really good digital marketers. So our goal is to make sure you get your information, your content into the hands of people who are looking for your services and your products at exactly the right time and exactly the right place and as affordable as possible. So that's what we do. We've got one, I'll call branding slide here for Microsoft that Mauricio can walk through quickly as well.
Yeah, well, thank you. I mean, this was brought to you by the good people at Microsoft, and it wouldn't be a public PSA if I didn't have this opportunity, right? So thank you. Really high level, right? We've been around for a while. Microsoft Ads is Bing. So if you are searching on Bing, you are searching and you will receive Microsoft advertising. So that's the nuts and bolts, right? And a couple of years ago, we went through a sort of like a small branding change, and over the years, we've sort of evolved. Through that evolution, we've grown, right? So where we sort of drop the mic is to that number on your left, right? That 37%. What's that mean? That means over 1 in 3 searches on a PC is performed on Bing. So that's 1/3 of the market on a desktop PC. So if you are searching either at work or in your personal computer at home, you might want to check what that browser is sort of set at default, and what search engine you're looking at, because we are here to deliver what you're looking for. We've been around for a number of years now, and we've continued to grow, right? And so that's really something we're really proud of, and we're continuing to grow.
Right. That's it for Mauricio and I doing our pitches. Now we're going to jump into the Q&A. We got some zingers for him. And by the way, feel free to put questions in. Our producer will fire the questions up to me, and if they're appropriate and not about Mauricio's hair, we will definitely ask him the question. So here we go. So Mauricio, first question, softball. How has search changed this year, and where do you see it going in 2021?
Yeah, so so I did all my traveling in the first quarter, right? And March sort of created a strong line in the sand for me and for everyone else, right? And so unless you've been living in a cave, you're probably actually better off, right? At this point, right? But the world has sort of changed, right? COVID has actually impacted not only just the world, right? But when it comes to, digital marketing and shopping and all this other stuff, it's changed us dramatically, right? Businesses had to adapt to a sort of new wave of productivity, a new way of getting products in front of folks, right? Sort of being omnipresent. And so what this created is sort of like a good opportunity for technology companies to get creative, right? To sort of accelerate some new development on products that they might have put as like, I don't know, shelved items. Like, that's a good idea maybe later on down the road, but if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? But the world is sort of broke in that respect, right? And so the digital world needed to sort of adjust. And what that did is it created some new opportunities, right? You can buy online and pick up in store. You can actually have something delivered to your house much quicker. And you have more services that are at your disposal now than you did maybe a year ago this time, right? And so it's really interesting in that respect. My crystal ball says that 2021, this isn't going to go away, right? Like we got into a crisis point in the world, and we've accelerated that. We've met that demand and need. And I think that, there's going to be some folks who are still going to be leveraging some of these new technologies, some of these new messaging, some of these new ways of getting in front of the right audience. And I'm personally excited, right? I'm excited to meet up in person, to sort of be more social. But I'm also really excited to leverage some of these things that were put into place by tech companies.
So Mauricio, is it fair to say that there was significant change on two ends of the spectrum? First of all, there are people that had maybe not necessarily adapted or adopted the fact that they could purchase products and services online that they didn't ever do that before, right? I mean, if early on when Amazon got started, people never imagined people buying clothes online.
Right.
Well, the fact that you can return it the next day at no cost with a label means you're much more comfortable doing that. And in that same sense, while people are now adopting this, the vendors and the brick and mortar retailers have certainly had to rethink the concept of a search. Right now, it's much more integral part of what they're doing, because people aren't going out and exploring. They're doing this from a tablet or a phone or a computer. So what do you see from a behavioral standpoint in both those spectrums?
Yeah, I mean, interesting enough, I mean, we have a stay-at-home economy now, right? We have a lot of folks who work in digital, work in some kind of capacity that doesn't require them to be in an actual office building, right? And so that sort of world right now needs to, they still need to do shopping, they still need to eat, they still need to get their things. And what they've done is we've actually seen search queries sort of go up and spike, and they haven't really come down. And in that, right? So we're seeing that from a consumer side, people are doing a lot more research. They're researching back and forth between Google, between Microsoft ads, between Facebook, and they're actually shortening up some purchase paths to purchase, interestingly enough, specifically for autos or mattresses. Oh, well, there you go, you pulled it up, right? I mean,
Yeah.
they've shortened that up because there's a lot of pent up demand, right? Some of it is to make their lives more comfortable. The other is to maybe just mitigate the risk that they could expose themselves to in a COVID world, right? Why take the subway? I have the income now to get a car. That sort of reduces my risk, right? And so what was once maybe a 90 to 120 days of path to purchase has really shortened up, and I think that's really interesting, because you just have to be present. If you are selling one of these products, you just have to be present all the time.
Right. And it probably makes people think differently about really connecting into their inner operations and their other systems, ERP systems, inventory management systems, because a lot of the markets we're looking at right here, particularly boats and cars, inventory became a problem.
Yeah.
Right. They could sell more product if they had inventory. So the ability to link into an inventory system to tie up to a product listing ad. So when I search for a particular product, I know that product is available from that particular retailer at that particular time. And if you're not showing there with your inventory, you lose that purchase instantly. And for something like a new kitchen or home service, that is the ability to get an appointment. So I need to find there's an open appointment slot. I also needed to know that you can come into my home and service me in a COVID compliant manner. So the messaging, the appointment scheduling, the inventory, those are big things that really change the way retailers think about e-commerce. It's, as you mentioned earlier, it's not just one channel, it's omni-channel, right? So they've got to be in all these different worlds. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I would love everyone to just do their exclusive search on Microsoft Ads and Bing, right? But the world doesn't operate that way, right? And so we recognize that. We know that you have to be on Google and you have to be on Microsoft Ads, right? Just because of the given market share and, again, where we are, right? And so with that, people bounce back and forth, right? Most people who are working from home have a PC, and that PC is operated by Windows. And Windows, the default search engine, the default browser is Edge, right? And it's Microsoft Ads and it's Bing, right? So in a lot of ways, these touch points are going to be that much more critical because, you don't leave work at the office anymore. Work is the living room or work is the spare bedroom. So in those aspects, it's just a matter of having to be present, right? People are going to be searching at all hours of the day, and you don't have to win the click, but you have to be there, right? And
Right.
and I think that's what's ultra important is that for these types of purchases, you just have to make sure that you're leveraging either your agency or the person you're working with to adopt new technologies, right? I mentioned earlier that we are accelerating our innovation on some of this stuff. Specifically for auto, we have local inventory ads now, right? So if I'm in the market for a car, I'm doing my research, I would probably trust the dealership that is closest to me, open, I can schedule, and they maximize the real estate that they're taking up on the search page, right? So if they're showing up at the text ad, They're showing up on the right side with their local inventory ad, says that the F-150 I'm looking for is here and it's available at the dealership that is a couple miles away. I can schedule that. That gives me peace of mind. It gives me a little bit more trust, and that I'm not wasting my time. So it's super critical for advertisers to be way more engaged right now with whoever they're working with to manage uh, their ad spend.
And you want to talk to your digital partner about where the best use of your funds are in any one of that, what I'll call channels, and then in the networks, particularly between Google and Bing. We at NetSertive have found there are specific markets where Bing just simply outperforms everything else. The demographics, the audience, the technology tie back into that, and that's learned over time. Yeah, I know, Maurice. I'm stroking a bit there, but it is true. And we've ran extensive testing in those markets. And then what we look at is inventory. We look at the demographics, et cetera, and then we test it, and we go back to some customers and say, we're going to shift some over here. Now, some customers say to us, you guys just take care of that for us. Other customers have strong opinions, and then we have to share some data back and forth. So, these considered purchases, as you mentioned, they're going to do research in multiple different channels before they make a decision. But ultimately, when they go to buy, that inventory has to be there, which kind of tees up our next question. So, Mauricio, give us the Christmas story about a very successful digital transformation that you're aware of.
Yeah. So, again, right, the sort of big guys did this early on, right? Think Walmart. They invested a ton of resources in getting ahead of the curve, right? They didn't have a crystal ball. They didn't predict that we would be living, 99.9% of the time at home and working there. But they got ahead of it. Maybe about 2 years ago, they just really started growing this piece, right? And then slowly but surely, some of the other big guys started following suit, right? Bang, COVID hits, and all of a sudden the world sort of transformed. Those big guys who could deliver on everything, having the inventory, showing that, building confidence in sort of the messaging, the ad copy, and providing an option for folks to do things safely and pick up their orders or have it delivered. They won the market, right? And so at this point now, we're starting to see some of the big guys also sort of start behaving that way. Think TJ Maxx, right? They've started to move into that world, right? And these are publicly traded companies that, in a lot of ways, probably didn't have this part of their roadmap because brick and mortar was their world, right? And all that is starting to trickle down, right? So when we're talking about the mom and pop shop, they need to start thinking about some of these things as well too, right? And in a lot of ways, companies like Microsoft, companies like Google, companies like Facebook, we want to partner with the local folks because this country's built on a lot of the backbone of small businesses, and if we're not providing the same sort of opportunities for them to be competitive in the market, then we're doing a disservice, right? And so right now we are seeing a massive shift in focus to localized economies, localized results, and provide some more opportunities and connections for folks to leverage these technologies to deliver to their
and I can add on 3 different examples there that are really interesting. So we do a lot of work in home furnishings, and mattresses is one of those. We just did some research for one of our clients, in the predicted rate at which mattresses will be purchased online grew 40% faster than the prediction in 3 years faster.
Yeah.
So it's just a dramatic shift in March, where people thought they had to go in and test it. Now that the people have changed their online game, the ease of access, the shipping, all those different things have been addressed. And the smart organizations have figured out how to leverage their local retailers to deliver those products in faster time because they have assets and inventory. So they blended their e-com and their local stores into one ecosystem. Another great example that I've seen, and you're a New Yorker, is Peloton, right? So who would have imagined a $2,500 bike? And I came from the fitness industry with a $50 subscription. I would have said 15 years ago that could never happen. Right. Yeah. And everybody that was going to a gym that may have decided I'll just use the gym and the bike now has a bike at home. And again, inventory, it's 8 weeks to get one of those things. So their online experience and their physical experience all tied together.
That's the biggest piece, I think, too, is that the demand has increased so much. And like, we're sort of, putting together these solutions to get folks what they need. We just don't have the inventory, right? It's in across the board, right? Some places just might have access to it faster, but in a lot of ways, you're not the first person to mention that sort of 8 week. I mean, I'm I'm a fitness guy myself. You can't tell from, the view here, but I'm also a gamer too, right? And so getting that new Nintendo Switch early on, they were so much in demand that you couldn't get them anywhere. You had to find a secondary market. And so
Sure.
in a lot of ways, right? So you see this sort of impact everything, right? And so, um, we're learning a lot more. And I think this is going to inform how we start to provide more, inventory for folks locally.
So another interesting market that we'll talk about is actually office furniture itself, right? So that industry, commercial office furniture, commercial real estate, has changed so much. They still need to reach the same buyer, because we will go back to offices eventually. It will be different. We'll go back. Now they've got to reach that buyer in their home when they're looking at their home office furniture versus the office furniture they have at work. And now they start to think of it differently, right? Office furniture now has taken on a whole new meaning as far as comfort, ergonomics, because we spend so much time there and it's within our home. So now when I go back to the office, I'm going to rethink that as well, which creates opportunity for organizations that have the ability to meet their buyers online as well as in a local service organization. It's a different message, it's a different value proposition. And there were some organizations that were leaning heavily online and capitalized, and others that were kind of, rethinking their thought process to get there as well. So all these different markets, people sitting on a couch at home used to spend an hour a night or 2 hours a night on your couch. Now you're spending a lot more time there and realizing I need a new couch.
Right.
So I'm going to search for a new couch, and how you reach them in different channels is important.
Yeah, and there's a lot of crossover. Interesting enough, like we, for the folks on the line, I invite you guys to leverage some of our free tools. There's one specifically, the Microsoft Ads Intelligence tool. You can download that to your Excel. It's a plugin, and we have a template that basically shows query, right? For if you look up DIY, we saw a massive lift, right? DIY encompasses so much, right? But folks were not only just looking for their work situation at home to be better, but they're also looking to improve, because you're spending 8 hours at work, you're probably not thinking about your kitchen as much. But if
Mm-hmm.
you're 24 hours at home, you look at your kitchen, maybe it is time for that remodel project, right? And so it's all happening, in a really unique way.
And when the market shifts back to people going into the office or into their workplace, that becomes that much more competitive in those
Mhm.
particular industries. People have never spent as much time as they did in boats as they did in 2020. It was a record year for every one of our customers in the marine business. But they know that when the Disney parks open and air travel becomes more apparent in hotels, they're going to compete for that time the way they used to. And now they're trying to get ahead of that strategy, make sure the content, the messaging, and the channels they're in align with that so they can be prepared for it. It's interesting to think that a boat dealer thinks about Disney as a competitor. It's
Right. It's like
astonishing, right?
leisure time is sort of now this like personal time that it's awesome. I mean, it's a great space to sort of like learn to see how this is all evolving. It's nuts.
Yeah, but if you're in any industry, the fact that you need to rethink who your competition is, right? It's
Yeah.
not necessarily the competitor. It could be time, it could be other activities. And that I love the fact that those marine dealers are thinking of their competitors differently. It's not, they weren't thinking of another boat dealer. They're thinking of a completely different alternative use of their time. That's a
Yeah.
fantastic way to think of marketing. So with that in mind, and we're thinking about metrics. So the examples I've listed here, in-store traffic, appointments, e-commerce purchases, there was a time where you used to look at one or the other. And now a lot of our clients understand that different products or services perform better in different places than they had not anticipated. So an example, this couch might sell really, really well on YouTube in this market, but
Mhm.
it does much better in store in this market. So that data is important. So how do you help your customers understand the differences between these metrics? How do you help them allocate budget, or what's your guidance for customers struggling with these three different metrics?
Yeah. So early on, we mentioned that you have to be present on all these channels, right? If you have a phone, you're probably having, a couple different apps there that speak to you, right? On Instagram, you probably visit Pinterest a lot. So you're sort of designing your life, you're cultivating a couple things that you like. But you're also spending time on Facebook, probably connecting with your friends from high school or your grandma, right? And then when you're going to do your search for something that sort of interests you intently, you go to Google or you go to Microsoft Ads, right? You go to Bing. And so in a lot of ways, you have to be present everywhere, right? And all these are valuable touch points, right? And so you have to understand what is going to drive the most engagement, And so if, again, in this world, every state right now in the United States is operating a little differently. And so maybe you can't go into the store, right? And so right now you're going to have to look at how do you measure that differently, right? So do you adapt to purchase online? Can folks purchase online? right? And so that becomes a lot more important this time around until things sort of start loosening up. Um, Appointments, right? All that, just making sure that you've looked at your website to make sure that it can support every single touch point for you to capture some engagement with your end advertiser. So I think in a lot of ways, if you didn't have one of these, you need to make sure that you start checking off all these boxes, because again, we don't behave the same way anymore. Like we just don't.
Yeah, agreed. And that leads us to our next question, which is how do you balance e-commerce and in-store conversion goals? Very different metrics. In fact, I think one of our clients has a very interesting balance between selling some products and services on Amazon, selling them in their own store, which they have seen tremendous rises because they had inventory when other people didn't, which is great, right? They had built relationships with their OEMs and manufacturers, and they also have their own retail stores. And until now, they looked at every one of those activities as unique activities. They looked at their Amazon store performance, they looked at their e-com performance and their in-store performance. What they didn't realize was the cost per lead was somewhat misleading in the transactions. They actually generated much higher sales in store and higher margin on some products versus online and vice versa, but they never had that kind of detail. So when you're sitting with customers, really breaking out your different channels, your different networks, your different objectives, and then what we focus on is ROI, because sometimes the metrics of cost per lead, cost per form fill, the actual store transactions are misleading. You have to look at your conversions and all the other metrics is actually the average sale price, et cetera. So when you're thinking about that, how do you help them look at that type of data to make sure they're making an informed decision?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say first, I encourage all your advertisers to ask that kind of question, right? What channels am I on, right? And what does that look like? A year ago, some folks weren't thinking about that, right? They were just like, here's my marketing budget all up. They give it to someone and they manage it. And they just know that the person that's coming into the door, they're paying sort of a general price for it, right? But now we really have to be mindful of the dollars, right? Because everything counts at this point. And so when we're looking at asking that type of question, your partner, like a NetSertive, is designed to drive in the right results, and they need to dial up, what is working and what isn't working, right? And so this is why you fine tune those things. Speaking about our personal network, Microsoft, we've done a lot of studies over the last 10 years about the type of person that searches on our network, right? We've seen that they used to skew a little older. Now they're going younger, right? So now we're a lot more Gen X, millennial, and we're finding that the folks who actually search on our network have a high income, right? They have an income of about 88K and up, right? And so, the type of product might speak to, you may, if your product is sort of like a longer path to purchase, you may want to get in front of these guys, right? And may want to dial it up, because it is likely that when they purchase, your profit margin might be a little higher, but you won't know that unless you ask the question and really get into the data with your agency, with your partner, right? Like a NetSertive. And this helps you guys really just dial up what is working and exploit that as much as you can, take advantage of it. Because again, I will say there's still some folks who don't take advantage of our network, and you could be the only game in town and you're raking in your number one. You're paying a very low cost for the click. You're paying a low cost for someone to sign up or give you a phone call. And at the end of the day, if they're walking off the lot with the product that they wanted and yields a higher margin for you, then that's happy days.
Excellent. Which kind of brings into this next question. How do you view omni-channel advertising? And what I want to talk about here particularly is the concept of top of the funnel awareness, bottom of the funnel research, evaluation, action. I think it's changing. So we see a lot more performance on the bottom of the funnel on display and retargeting than we used to. So we're using display and video as conversion platforms, conversion tools, conversion networks, where before it was just awareness. So blending that omni-channel view of your products and services, you have to think differently about your creative. You have to think differently, as you mentioned, about scaling it locally, right? So you talked about, I want to make sure that truck I'm searching for is available at that particular dealership. That means that dealer's phone number, their inventory have to be fed into that. That's a complicated thing to do if you're dealing with thousands of dealers in a specific brand or OEM network. That takes a very different thought process, especially some of the display and retargeting. If you can think about how display, CTV, which we did another webinar on before, all those things live together. I want to make sure, Mauricio, if you're looking for a leather couch on your phone and you go in to watch Hulu or another one of the CTV networks, we'll show you an ad for that particular couch if the inventory is available at that local reseller. So that's a very different thought process than running a search ad. How do you guys view that at Microsoft?
Yeah. So, again, that's not lost on us, right? We understand that omni-channel is super important. It doesn't matter what the product is, right? Because offline is just as important as it is to be online, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what we've started to do is our product has started to evolve, right? We don't just focus on text ads anymore. We offer a shopping component, right? So if you are, looking to have an online presence, we plug right into that, right? We're also offering local ads for dealers, right? And so we're making those things available. Additionally, we have a lot of first party data. Microsoft's been around for a really long time, and we've been sitting on a lot of data. And we've also made some really interesting purchases, like a LinkedIn, right? That was a couple years ago. It's a bright and shiny new thing. It's awesome. But initially, I was like, what are we going to do with it? I mean, I like it. And so what we all started to do is, well, not just me, but some folks who are above me, right? And sort of, have a lot more whiteboards around them. They put their heads together and we're like, okay, how do we start understanding this data? What are these signals telling us? And these signals are telling us that we can actually understand what audiences look like, right? So who's in the market for a particular type of product? Here are the signals for that. And we tested it out and it worked. And it became and it evolved into a new product of ours. It's called audience targeting. And we're actually leveraging our properties, which is first party. So, it doesn't get any better than that. Think MSN.com, think the Edge browser, and think Outlook.com, right? Couple that with search and our targeting capabilities with LinkedIn, you can really hone in on that finite part of the funnel. So again, it's not lost on us. We've evolved. We're accelerating more product development every month, every week. And, we're plugging right into that path to purchase, right? And it's getting complex. You mentioned it, right? If I'm searching on my phone and I get the ad on YouTube or on Hulu, it also needs to find its way into my morning routine, looking at the news, right? And when I'm actually out and about, probably in the location or the area. So, we have a lot of these data points that we invite folks to take advantage of.
So I want to talk about LinkedIn briefly. We have been doing LinkedIn for a little over a year now from a LinkedIn advertising perspective. And we have discovered from a B2B perspective, our B2B clients, it's very powerful, particularly at a national level, because when you're looking for a very specific role, it's so targeted that sometimes in a regional campaign, there's not enough of an audience to actually drive that level of activity. But if you're looking for a very specific company that maybe has a stipend or another service, you can actually target that organization with those parameters, and it's really, really powerful. So I apologize, my printer is actually going off next to me. My son is printing something from his office upstairs.
That is your stock ticker.
How rude, huh? How rude. But so talk to us about how your B2B customers are leveraging LinkedIn as a tool, and talk about some of the ads that come through there and how you can also target what I'll call experts or influencers in a particular space to actually drive that content as well.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. So two things, right? Microsoft is huge on trust, right? Huge on trust. It's a tongue twister. I'm saying that at the forefront because we understand that LinkedIn can be very targeted, right? Because some people who participate are hyper qualified. They're qualifying themselves. I am the CFO of X company, and I live in Raleigh, Durham, and I work in this industry. In a lot of ways, like that's too personal, right? And so what we wanted to do is we wanted to make sure that we could leverage the totality of an industry, the totality of a company with a certain size, so that it doesn't become so personalized that it's terrifying. And the third piece was we wanted to make sure that we can get in front of decision makers, right? So in a lot of ways, there was a lot of negotiation that had to happen in between the data science team and the product development team. And we came together to find like a really unique solution, right? It's become a layering component, right? So on our network, you can target for age, you can target for device, you can target for industry, you can target for type of role, right? So we want to make it broad enough so that you can get in front of the right audience without being too invasive.
Yeah, and I'll little props to the LinkedIn team. Our team says it's one of the easiest tools to work in,
Yeah.
right? To configure campaigns, very, very well done. Which leads us into kind of our closing thought process here, Mauricio. What's the thing you're most excited about in Microsoft advertising going into 2021?
I'm excited about the shopping offering. I'm excited about the audience network. So those are two
Okay.
things there. Again, not taking anything away from search. Search is still sexy and it still gives you what you need.
Mhm.
But we're sort of putting bells and whistles on top of this that are actually, supercharging advertising campaigns. We're finding new ways to create ways for folks to interact with an ad that can localize more results, right?
Okay.
So, if I'm looking for a general contractor to redo my kitchen, sure, I can click on like a home advisor or something, right? But if I worked with like a rebath or something, and they had a opportunity for me to put in my zip code, and then they deliver something very personal to me, like in that
Mhm.
respect, I'm absolutely going to go with that, right? Because that's an additional touch that drives an engagement point, right? There's confidence with engagement. So we're starting to build a lot of more into that for the brick and mortar stuff. I'm not a very important person, but there's certain things that I would rather do online. Buying my toilet paper, buying my paper towels, um, buying the type of shirts, undershirts, and just having the ease for that to be delivered at my house, and I can return it with the same label. Like that's the awesome stuff. Um, but when
Well,
we
I hope any vendor that's out there just paid attention to your demographic description of toilet paper, paper towel, and undershirts. It's a very specific buyer demographic, Mauricio.
It's a
I
guy
like
who
it.
spends a lot of time on his couch, right? But
That's
yeah,
that's the
eventually
persona.
he's gonna move into the Peloton world.
That's the persona we're targeting. Well, we're very grateful for your time today. If anybody has any questions, I'm going to flip to the last slide. Our contact information is available here. And if you want to just reach out directly, we can maybe answer more questions or talk about how either Microsoft or NetSertive can help you with your digital advertising needs. So Mauricio, a great, well done. I can tell you're an improv guy. So I hope you have a wonderful holiday season and we appreciate your time today.
Yes, and you as well. Thank you for having me. Find me on LinkedIn as well, folks. Let's be friends. Let's amplify the network and reach out. Thanks for the
Absolutely.
time, Pete.
And thanks to all of our attendees. We appreciate your time.